I never imagined that the sister who once promised to protect my children would become the very person trying to destroy their lives. But when I discovered her secret plan to steal not just their inheritance, but their love for me, I knew that revenge would be the only language she would understand. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning while I was making breakfast for my twins, Emma and Jake. They were 8 years old, innocent and beautiful, with my late husband's eyes and my stubborn determination. I had been raising them alone since David passed away 3 years ago. And every day was a struggle, but we were managing. We were happy. "Mom's asking for you," my sister Caroline said, her voice strangely cold through the phone. "She wants to see you today." My mother had been battling cancer for 6 months, and each visit to the hospital felt like it might be the last. Caroline had been staying with her constantly, playing the devoted daughter role to perfection. I should have seen the warning signs then, should have noticed how she always seemed to usher me out when the lawyers came to visit, how she would whisper urgently to Mom whenever I arrived. "I will be there this afternoon," I told her, wiping flour from my hands. "Are the kids okay to come?" "Actually," Caroline's voice took on that fake sweet tone I had learned to dread. "Maybe just you this time. Mom's pretty tired." That should have been my first clue. My mother adored Emma and Jake. She had been their primary babysitter before she got sick, and seeing them always brought light to her eyes. But I was grieving, exhausted, and trying to balance work with single motherhood. I was not thinking clearly. When I arrived at the hospital, Mom looked frilier than ever, her once vibrant spirit dimmed by pain and medication. Caroline was there, of course, hovering like a protective angel, but there was something different about her posture. Something almost possessive about the way she positioned herself between Mom and me. "Sweetheart," Mom whispered, reaching for my hand with trembling fingers. "I need to tell you something important." Caroline's eyes flashed with something I could not quite identify. "Mom, you should rest. We can talk about this later." "No," Mom said, her voice gaining strength. "I need to say this now." She looked directly at me, her eyes filled with what I now realize was regret. "I have changed my will. Caroline helped me understand that with your situation, with the kids and everything, it would be better if she handled the estate. She can take care of things better than you can right now." The words hit me like a physical blow. My mother's estate was not enormous, but it was significant. The house where we grew up, the life insurance money, the savings account she had carefully built over decades of teaching. Most importantly, it was the security I had been counting on for Emma and Jake's future. College funds, a stable home, the safety net every parent dreams of providing. "Mom," I said carefully. "What do you mean exactly?" Caroline stepped forward, her hand possessively on Mom's shoulder. "What she means is that I will inherit everything, and then I can help you and the kids as needed. It is more practical this way. I have a stable marriage, a good job, no children to worry about. I can manage the money better." The phrase "no children to worry about" cut deep. Caroline and her husband Mark had been trying for years to have children, struggling with infertility that had left them bitter and envious. I had always been sensitive about their situation, never complaining about the challenges of single motherhood in front of them, always including them in the kids' lives. "But Mom," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, "what about Emma and Jake's future? This was always meant to be for them." "They will be taken care of," Caroline said quickly, too quickly. "I promise you that." Mom squeezed my hand weakly. Caroline explained everything to me. "She showed me how you have been struggling, how you cannot even afford to fix your car properly. She said the kids need stability, need someone who can provide for them properly." I felt like I was drowning. Caroline had been documenting my struggles, cataloging every moment of financial stress, every time I had to choose between paying for Emma's dance lessons or fixing the washing machine. She had been building a case against me, using my vulnerability as a weapon. "I see," I said quietly, because what else could I say? My mother was dying, and I was not going to spend her final days fighting over money. But Caroline was not finished. Over the next few weeks, as Mom's condition worsened, my sister began what I now understand was a calculated campaign to insinuate herself into my children's lives. She started showing up at their school, claiming she was helping me out. She would take them shopping, buying them expensive toys and clothes I could not afford. Aunt Caroline says we might get to live in Grandma's big house someday. Emma told me one evening, her 8-year-old voice innocent and excited. She says it would be better than our apartment. My blood ran cold. What else did Aunt Caroline say? She said you work too hard and you are always tired. She said maybe she could take better care of us. That night, after I put the kids to bed, I called Caroline. What are you doing? I am helping, she said, her voice maddeningly calm. The kids need stability, and you are clearly overwhelmed. Maybe it would be better if they came to stay with Mark and me for a while, just until you get back on your feet. Absolutely not. Think about it rationally, Caroline continued. I have the big house now, the financial resources. The kids would have their own rooms, could go to better schools. You could visit whenever you want. They are my children, Caroline. They are not yours. Not yet, she said, and something in her tone made my skin crawl. But I have been talking to a lawyer. Given your financial situation, your work schedule, the fact that you have no family support anymore. She let the threat hang in the air. My sister was threatening to sue for custody of my children. Mom passed away 2 weeks later. The funeral was a blur of grief and rage, made worse by watching Caroline play the grieving daughter, while she had destroyed our family. She inherited everything, just as she had orchestrated. The house, the money, the security that should have been my children's future. But losing the inheritance was nothing compared to what happened next. Caroline ramped up her campaign for the children's affection. She enrolled them in expensive activities, promising them things I could not provide. She whispered poison in their ears about how hard their life was with me, how much easier it would be with her. Mom, Jake said one evening, his 9-year-old face serious beyond his years, why do not we have as much money as Aunt Caroline? Why do we have to live in this small apartment when she has the big house? Because sometimes life is not fair, sweetheart, I said, fighting back tears. But we have each other, and that is what matters most. Aunt Caroline says that if we lived with her, we could have our own swimming pool. Emma nodded eagerly, and she said she would pay for my dance lessons and Jake's soccer camp. I realized with growing horror that Caroline was not just trying to take my children's inheritance. She was trying to take my children. The custody papers arrived on a Friday. Caroline was suing for full custody, claiming I was an unfit mother due to financial instability, emotional distress, and inability to provide proper care. She had documented everything. Every time I had been late picking up the kids because of work, every time they had worn the same clothes 2 days in a row, every moment of normal parenting struggle that she had twisted into evidence of neglect. But the most devastating part was the statement from the children themselves. Somehow, Caroline had convinced them to tell a social worker that they would prefer to live with her. 8- and 9-year-old children, manipulated by expensive gifts and false promises, had been turned against their own mother. I hired a lawyer I could not afford and prepared to fight the battle of my life. But Caroline had resources I did not have. She had the inherited money, the stable marriage, the big house. She had been planning this for months, maybe years. The first custody hearing was a nightmare. Caroline's lawyer painted me as a struggling single mother, who could not provide proper care, while Caroline sat there looking prosperous and stable. My own children testified that they wanted to live with their aunt, their innocent voices cutting through my heart like knives. Mrs. Johnson, the judge said, while I understand your desire to keep your children, I have to consider what is in their best interest. Mrs. Caroline Miller has demonstrated superior financial resources and stability. I was granted supervised visitation every other weekend. My own children, who I had raised from birth, who I had loved and sacrificed for, were now living with the woman who had systematically destroyed our family. But Caroline had made one crucial mistake. She thought I would give up. She thought I would accept defeat and fade away, leaving her to play mother to my children with my mother's money. She was wrong. I started investigating. I hired a private investigator with money I did not have, taking out loans and working extra shifts to pay for it. I needed to know how Caroline had manipulated my mother, how she had orchestrated this entire scheme. What I found was even worse than I had imagined. Caroline had been stealing from Mom for months before she died. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. She had convinced Mom that I was asking for money constantly, forging emails and text messages to make it look like I was pressuring our dying mother for financial support. But the most damning evidence was a recording I found on Mom's old phone, one that Caroline had forgotten to delete. It was Caroline's voice, clear as day, talking to her husband Mark about their plan. "The kids are almost convinced," Caroline said on the recording. "A few more months of this, and they will be begging to live with us permanently. Once we get custody, we will have everything. The house, the money, and the children we always wanted." "What about your sister?" Mark's voice asked. "What about her? She will get supervised visits if she is lucky. Eventually, the kids will forget about her entirely. They will be our children." The recording was dated 2 weeks before Mom's death. Caroline had been planning to steal my children while our mother was dying. I also discovered that Caroline had been lying to the social worker about my fitness as a mother. She had paid neighbors to make false reports about me, claiming I left the children alone, or that they were always dirty and hungry. She had created an entire fictional narrative about my parenting, supported by people she had bribed or manipulated. Armed with this evidence, I went back to court. But Caroline's lawyer was good, and they managed to get most of the evidence thrown out on technicalities. The recording was deemed inadmissible because it was obtained without permission. The financial records were considered irrelevant to the custody case. I was losing my children, and there seemed to be nothing I could do about it. That is when I decided that if the legal system would not give me justice, I would have to create my own. I started with social media. I created accounts on every platform and began telling my story. I posted photos of my children, videos of their life before Caroline destroyed it, evidence of the manipulation and lies. I tagged Caroline's employer, her friends, her social circle. The response was overwhelming. Other parents shared their own stories of custody battles and family betrayal. Local news stations picked up the story. Caroline's reputation began to crumble as people realized what she had done. But I was not finished. I had discovered that Caroline's husband Mark had been having an affair with his secretary for over a year. Caroline had no idea. She was so focused on stealing my children that she had not noticed her own marriage falling apart. I arranged for Caroline to find out about the affair in the most public way possible. I sent the evidence to her workplace, to her friends, to the judge handling our custody case. I made sure she learned about her husband's betrayal at the same time everyone else did. The divorce proceedings were ugly and public. Mark tried to claim half of the inherited estate, arguing that it was marital property. Caroline fought back viciously, but the stress was destroying her carefully constructed facade. More importantly, the children were beginning to see their aunt for who she really was. Without the expensive gifts and constant manipulation, they started to remember their real home, their real mother. Emma began asking when she could come home. Jake started crying during their supervised visits with me, begging me to take him back. The final blow came when I discovered that Caroline had been using my mother's identity to apply for credit cards and loans after her death. Identity theft of a deceased person is a federal crime, and I made sure the authorities knew about it. Caroline was arrested at her workplace, handcuffed in front of her colleagues and clients. The local news stations were there, having been tipped off by an anonymous source. Her mugshot was plastered across social media, shared thousands of times by people who had followed our story. The custody case collapsed immediately, with Caroline facing federal charges and her marriage in ruins. The judge had no choice but to return my children to me. The supervised visitation order was lifted, and I was granted full custody once again. But the revenge was not complete. I sued Caroline for the stolen inheritance, armed with evidence of her manipulation and fraud. The court ordered her to return everything she had taken, plus damages for the emotional trauma she had caused my children. Caroline's house was foreclosed on when she could not make the payments without the stolen money. Her husband left her for his secretary, taking what remained of their joint assets. She lost her job due to the criminal charges and the public scandal. The woman who had once thought she could steal my children and my mother's money was left with nothing. No husband, no house, no money, no children. She was exactly where she had tried to put me. The children adjusted back to our life together beautifully. They had learned a valuable lesson about manipulation and false promises. Emma went back to her dance lessons, paid for with the returned inheritance money. Jake joined a better soccer team. We moved into a nice house in a good neighborhood, the kind of stability Caroline had claimed I could never provide. But the most satisfying moment came a year later, when Caroline approached me at the grocery store. She looked tired, defeated, wearing clothes that had seen better days. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "I know what I did was wrong. I wanted children so badly, and I thought." "You thought you could steal mine," I said calmly. "You thought you could manipulate two innocent children and destroy their family for your own selfish desires. Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had once been my sister, who had shared my childhood and my mother's love. The woman who had tried to destroy my children's lives for her own twisted needs. "Forgiveness is earned," I said finally. "And you have not even begun to pay for what you did to Emma and Jake. They still have nightmares about being taken away from me. They still ask me if you are going to try to steal them again." Caroline's eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing for her pain. She had shown no mercy when she was destroying my family. She deserved none now. "Stay away from my children," I said, turning to walk away. "Stay away from my family. You made your choice when you decided to play God with our lives." As I walked away, I heard her sobbing behind me, but I did not look back. Caroline had taught me that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who will hurt you the deepest. She had shown me that family can be the most dangerous enemy of all. But she had also taught me that mothers will do anything to protect their children. That love is stronger than manipulation. That truth is stronger than lies. And that karma always finds a way. My children are safe now. They know they are loved, know they are protected, know that their mother will never stop fighting for them. Caroline is alone with the consequences of her choices, and that is exactly where she belongs. Sometimes revenge is not about getting even. Sometimes it is about making sure that evil actions have consequences, that people who try to destroy families face justice for their crimes. Caroline wanted to play the long game, to slowly steal my children and my mother's legacy. But she forgot that I am their mother, and a mother's love is the most powerful force in the universe. She discovered that the hard way. If you enjoyed this story of justice served and karma delivered, make sure to subscribe to Revenge Janet. Hit that notification bell, so you never miss a story where betrayal meets its match and justice always prevails. Share your own revenge stories in the comments below. Your story could be featured in our next video. Remember, at Revenge Janet, we believe that every betrayal deserves its consequence, and every victim deserves their moment of triumph. Subscribe now and join our community of justice seekers.